The captain was hanging in the corridor just 5 meters ahead of me, the monster gripping his neck, his feet dangling off the ground as he kicked desperately in midair. I was slumped behind this vending machine, my right hand clamped tight over my mouth, not even daring to breathe loudly. If I rushed out now, I'd end up just like him, but all I could do was watch. That monster looked so wrong, one glance made your chest tighten. It was incredibly tall, almost as tall as 2 normal people stacked together. Its whole body stretched out long, its skeleton twisted and crooked. Its arms were absurdly long, one arm actually having 3 elbows, all those elbows bent backward, like branches that had been snapped the wrong way, sharp angles jutting out. It had no skin at all, bare and naked, its surface covered in layers of constantly flickering little squares. Those squares flashed red one moment, blue the next, overlapping and shifting, making your eyes ache. The worst part was its face, a deep pit in the middle, packed densely with eyeballs. Those eyeballs rolled around wildly, some looking up, some looking down with no pattern at all. That long, twisted hand was clamped around the captain's neck. Every time the little squares on the monster's body flickered, a chunk of the captain's tactical vest would vanish out of thin air. Then a piece of his ribcage disappeared too. There was no blood where those spots vanished, the missing clothes and bone just turned into black particles floating in the air, falling off piece by piece, disappearing when they hit the ground. The captain's mouth was wide open, but he couldn't make a sound. His jaw had already twisted to one side, dislocated. He turned his head and stared straight at me with his last bit of strength, his eyes locked on my direction. His right hand was still slapping the ground desperately, his fingernails scraping against the hard tiles with a sharp screech. The tiles themselves started flickering too, rainbow stripes appearing on their surface. The gun slipped from my hand. That hunk of metal hit the concrete floor with a crisp clatter. The sound was especially loud in the dead-silent corridor. The monster's sunken face suddenly moved, its neck cracking with a series of sharp pops as its entire head twisted a full 180 degrees. All those rolling eyeballs stopped at once, fixed dead on me. That monster's head turned around and stared straight at me. I remembered what happened half an hour ago. Back then, the 4 of us were still in the training pod, at the lowest level of the base. We were standing on omnidirectional treadmills, wearing heavy military VR headsets, holding fake rifles that felt solid. We were simulating a fight in a high-rise building, working together smoothly, patting each other on the shoulder as we advanced. A crisp electronic chime sounded in our earpieces, saying the mission was complete. All 4 of us breathed a sigh of relief, pulled off the big visors, and wiped the hot sweat from our faces with our sleeves. Laughing and talking loudly, we reached out and pushed open the heavy iron door of the simulation pod. The corridor outside was blindingly bright, white and glaring, but the whole base was too quiet. At this hour, the control console would normally be packed with technicians, and the instructor would be shouting at us over his coffee cup, mocking us for being too slow. Now, there wasn't a single person behind the long console. Old Salt walked over and touched the desk. The coffee cup on it was still steaming, wisps of heat curling upward. The keyboard was still lit, the screen flashing green data, but no one was there. Old Salt thought it was strange. He strode over to the window at the end of the corridor, wanting to see if everyone was gathering on the big parade ground outside. The captain, the youngest team member, and I followed. Old Salt grabbed the window frame and looked out, then suddenly froze. He stayed there motionless, making heavy, wheezing breaths, his voice trembling badly. We crowded up to the window and looked down. The sky was blue, the grass outside was green, but the sun hanging in the sky was wrong. The edge of its circle was all blocky squares, rough and crude, like the pixelated games we played as kids. The boundary between the grass and the concrete was blurry too, flickering with patches of static snow. This was nothing but a fake sky. We had never left that simulator. The captain reacted fastest. He spun around and ran for the base's main entrance, reaching out to pull the heavy blast door as he ran. The big handle rattled as he shook it, but the door was stuck tight in its track, refusing to budge no matter how hard he tried. Just as we were all pushing hard against the gate, a sharp burst of static suddenly blasted from the loudspeaker above our heads, piercing our ears. Then, the same computerized female voice that usually signaled the start of our drills during training rang out. Her voice was completely flat, without any rise or fall, echoing through the empty hall like a straight line. She said, "Phase 1 environmental adaptation complete. Now commencing live fire hunting test. Your 4-person team is designated as moving targets." The moment her voice stopped, all the white lights above us went out, and red emergency lights began flashing on and off. The walls around us started to change. Large chunks of white cement plaster peeled off, disappearing as soon as they hit the ground. Beneath the plaster, the walls were covered in green glowing dots and numbers, scrolling upward in rows. We quickly grabbed the rifles we had brought out. Even though this was training, the rifles were loaded with real, live ammunition. The squad leader pulled the bolt, and the sound of a round being chambered rang out crisp and clear in the red glow. The 4 of us formed a tight circle, pressing our backs firmly against each other, aiming our rifles into the surrounding darkness. From the end of the corridor came a strange noise. It was the sound of bone joints snapping violently, crack, crack, one after another. That was when the monster emerged, shuffling backward out of the corner, step by step. The creature with its 3-jointed elbows walked straight toward us. The youngest team member's fingers were trembling uncontrollably. He couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a yell, opening fire with his rifle at the monster's chest. Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, a stream of bullets tore through the air. The hall was filled with deafening gunfire. The bullets hit the monster's body with a dull thud, like a heavy wooden club slamming into a thick quilt. The monster didn't even flinch. The bullets sank into the shimmering, colorful squares covering its surface, without leaving a single hole. The flesh on its chest suddenly rippled like water, absorbing all the bullets that had hit it. Then its chest flipped outward, spitting out a pile of mangled metal shavings that clattered onto the floor tiles, scattering everywhere. The young team member stared in shock, his rifle still firing nonstop. Suddenly, the monster moved. It didn't run. Its legs didn't even move. Its entire body slid across the ground like a block of ice on a frozen surface, gliding toward us at incredible speed. It was so fast that in the blink of an eye, it was right in front of us. It raised an arm, and that long limb with 3 elbows traced a strange arc through the air, slamming directly onto the young team member's right shoulder. No blood flowed, no bones cracked. The instant the monster's hand touched him, his entire right arm, along with his right collarbone, turned into countless tiny gray squares. Those squares scattered across the floor, rolling around like sand, then slowly turned transparent and vanished into thin air. The young team member stared at his now empty right side, collapsed to the ground in pain, and screamed at the top of his lungs. The squad leader grabbed the young team member's tactical vest with his left hand, dragging him backward, while raising his right hand to fire his rifle at the monster's head. I joined in, pulling the trigger frantically. Shell casings bounced onto the floor one after another, gleaming copper in the red emergency lights. Our bullets hammered into the monster's face, popping its swirling eyeballs one by one. But from those burst eyeballs, a thick, black, oily liquid oozed out, and as soon as it spilled, it formed new eyeballs that started spinning again in the hollow sockets. The veteran yelled from behind, telling us to fall back, to retreat into the passageway. We kept firing to suppress the monster, while dragging the young team member deeper into the corridor. The monster followed us at a leisurely pace. Every time its joints moved, the air around it filled with large patches of colorful horizontal stripes, like the static on a broken TV screen. Wherever we retreated, the cement walls would bubble up, with layers of lime plaster peeling off to reveal eerie, glowing green numbers. Up ahead was a corner, and beyond it, a heavy blast-proof iron door. The veteran rushed over, bracing his shoulder against the door to pry it open just a crack. The squad leader shoved the young team member inside. My rifle let out a click. I was out of ammo. I fumbled for a spare magazine on my belt, but the more I panicked, the more my hands shook, and the magazine got stuck in its pouch, refusing to budge. The monster was already right in front of me, its hand with 3 joints reaching for my head. I could even smell a particularly pungent odor, like the burnt smell of plastic wire ends in a fire, so acrid it made my eyes water. The captain shoved me hard from behind, sending me flying through the air into the room. Then the captain tried to back in himself, but the monster's long arm had already grabbed him by the neck, lifting him off the ground. The captain's feet kicked wildly in the air, as he desperately tried to pry the monster's fingers apart with both hands. But the monster's body was too hard. When the captain's fingers dug into it, they made a sound like scraping against a hard plastic shell. Old Salt was shouting from behind the door, firing the remaining bullets at the monster's arm outside. The bullets chipped the edges of the wall into rubble, but the monster's arm only emitted a series of colorful halos, its 3 elbows twisting backward one after another, pulling the captain's body outward. The young soldier lay on the floor of the control room, a large chunk missing from his right side, the wound edges flickering with tiny pixel blocks. He grabbed the leg of a table with his left hand, whimpering and sobbing through his nose. I fell to the ground, looking at the captain outside the door. His clothes were fading piece by piece. He glanced down at me, trying to speak, but his jaw, crushed under the monster's monstrous grip, had already twisted completely to the base of his ear. With his last strength, using his only movable left hand, he clung desperately to the doorframe, refusing to let the monster drag him fully into that dark corridor filled with numbers. At that moment, the emergency red light on the door suddenly went out, plunging the entire hall into dead silence. Only the red and blue squares flickering unevenly across the monster's body illuminated half of the captain's face, turning it red one moment and blue the next. With all our strength, Old Salt and I pressed hard against the heavy blast-proof iron door. A loud bang came from outside, followed by the captain's final slap against the door panel. Then the sounds of impact and bones snapping outside all stopped at once. The entire corridor, the entire room, fell so silent that we could hear our own heartbeats. Old Salt leaned against the door panel, his body sliding slowly down the iron door until he sat on the floor. He gasped for breath, wiping his face with a sweat-soaked hand. He turned his head, looked at the young soldier lying on the ground whimpering, then looked at me. He patted his chest and whispered to me, "Don't panic, don't panic. That monster's gone quiet. Maybe it's stuck at the corner of the corridor. This must be the base's latest holographic projection technology, or some high-tech prank test. Yeah, that's it. The young guy's arm might just be hit by some electronic toxin that causes paralyzing hallucinations. We're still safe." I didn't say anything. I just grabbed the nearby ammo crate and slowly stood up. This storage room for spare ammunition looked normal. The walls were green cement, and neatly stacked in the corners were rows of dark green wooden ammo crates. I reached out and touched the crate beside me. The wood surface was rough, giving off a dry sawdust smell very real. I also touched my own tactical vest. The fabric was stiff, and the zipper felt cold and metallic. The outside world seemed to have truly calmed down. No monster roars, no strange sounds of joints cracking. But when my gaze fell on the desk in the middle of the room, I noticed something was off. On the desk sat a green desk lamp, and next to it was a military mechanical watch. The watch lay flat on the desktop. I walked over and stared at the watch face. The second hand was moving, tick by tick. A normal watch's second hand moves evenly tick, tick, tick. But this watch's second hand would move, then freeze in place for a long, long time. It would stay motionless. Then after about 10 seconds, it would suddenly jerk forward, then freeze again. The air in the entire room felt like it had turned into a pot of thick, sticky porridge, trapping everything inside. I raised my right hand to pick up the watch. My hand reached forward through the air. I clearly saw that as my right hand moved forward, it left behind several overlapping palm shadows in the air, like multiple photos of my hand lined up in a row, pasted into the air. I pulled my hand back and looked down at my feet. Under the neatly stacked wooden ammunition boxes in the corner, a layer of black, sticky liquid had seeped out at some point. Instead of spreading flat across the floor, this liquid climbed up the sides of the wooden crates, one level at a time. Wherever it crawled, the green planks began to turn into red and green pixelated squares, flickering in the air. The military watch lying flat on the table suddenly let out a sharp crack. I stared hard in that direction. The watch case split clean in two, and the mainspring and shiny metal gears all burst out at once. They fell onto the table, but instead of bouncing off the wooden surface, the moment they touched it, their shapes stretched out, turning into strings of green English letters and numbers. Those digits glowed briefly in midair, then vanished like cotton wool burned by fire, leaving not even a trace behind. Old Salt was still mumbling his earlier words of comfort. Rubbing his thigh, he slowly climbed up from the floor. The young team member lying on the ground suddenly stopped grunting. The room fell eerily silent, leaving only Old Salt's heavy breathing. I turned my head to look at the young guy. He lay stiffly beside the ammo boxes. More than half of his body, which was missing an arm, had already become blurry. The skin on his face began to peel off not flesh, but small, semi-transparent squares. Those squares flickered at high frequency under the red emergency lights. Through the holes in his face, I could see straight down to the floor tiles beneath his head. The bones and blood vessels inside his body had all turned into blue, shimmering lines of light. Old Salt had just straightened his back. He took one look at the young man's face, then leaped backward, slamming his back hard against the reinforced concrete wall behind him. He shouted incoherently, flailing his arms as he tried to grab the wall behind him for support to steady himself. But the moment his arms touched the wall, they passed straight through the solid concrete. His entire arm sank into the wall, as if the wall didn't exist at all, just a patch of air on the ground. Old Salt yanked his hand back in terror. The instant he pulled it out, the entire wall behind us began to tremble violently on a massive scale. The green paint and concrete blocks started turning white, one square at a time, stuttering badly like a video buffering, the whole scene tearing apart. Then that thick concrete wall vanished before our eyes. No thunderous crash of collapsing walls, no clouds of dust. Where the green-painted wall and stacked ammo boxes had been, there was now a gaping empty hole. Through that hole, we could see straight out into the big corridor beyond. The huge monster with 3 elbows stood right in the middle of the corridor, less than 2 meters away from us. Its long body twitched rhythmically under the alternating red and blue emergency lights. The deep hollow pit on its face was aimed directly at us, and the dozens of eyeballs inside suddenly stopped their frantic rolling. 3 particularly large eyes locked straight ahead, staring motionlessly at Old Salt, who was crouched on the ground with his hand still hanging in midair. The floor beneath the monster's feet had completely turned into a pitch-black void. Countless green code numbers like falling rain scrolled frantically up its ankles. The burnt smell from its body hit my nose instantly, now that the wall was gone. Old Salt sat on the floor, shaking all over. His rifle lay beside his hip. One of the monster's long arms had slowly lifted, its 3 reverse-bent elbows cracking sharply. That huge hand, made of colorful squares with no fingernails, was aimed right at Old Salt's forehead. I reached out my right hand to grab Old Salt's tactical vest, trying to pull him toward me. As I extended my hand, I watched my own 5 fingers stretch into a long string of green afterimages in midair. My fingers touched Old Salt's clothes, but it didn't feel like fabric at all, more like plunging my hand into a basin of cold, slimy water, slippery, and completely unable to get a grip. The loudspeaker overhead crackled to life again. The AI female voice, flat as a line, said in a perfectly clear tone, "System error detected. Initiating second round of data cleanup." With that sound, the ceiling above us began to lose its color. Large black squares fell from the ceiling, crashing into the hard floor tiles and leaving deep black craters. Inside those craters, there was nothing, just endless, bottomless black. The young team member lay on the ground, his legs now turning into gray grains of sand, spreading outward across the floor. The old-timer screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice completely distorted by sheer terror, sounding as sharp and grating as fingernails scraping across a chalkboard. He grabbed the rifle that had fallen to the ground, pulled back the safety, and without a second thought, squeezed the trigger at the monster's chest. The muzzle flash lit up the dark warehouse in bursts. Spent shell casings clattered against my face, stinging painfully. But every bullet that hit a spot made the air ripple like water, and then that patch of scenery vanished. Our bullets weren't hurting the monster, they were punching holes in the warehouse around us. Through those holes, black numbers surged in like a tide, rushing toward our feet. The old-timer's rifle kept spitting fire. Bullet after bullet slammed into the monster's face and body. The empty brass casings fell into the black pits beneath us, sinking silently without a sound. The old-timer kicked his legs frantically against the ground. As he fired, he pressed his back against the remaining half of the wall, shrinking to the right as hard as he could. His tactical boots stomped on the fallen black squares, making a rustling sound like stepping on a pile of dry leaves. His eyes were wider than the shell casings, blood vessels bursting, and he kept screaming, shouting his wife and child's names. One of the monster's long arms flickered in the muzzle flash. Its 3 backward-bending elbows suddenly retracted, then snapped forward like a fully drawn spring. That massive hand, covered in colorful pixels, slammed directly into the old-timer's right side of his body armor. The old-timer was launched upward by the impact. The moment the tactical vest was touched, large swaths of fabric shattered into green specks of light. His right collarbone wobbled, and he crumpled sideways off balance. The gun in his hand kept firing, bullets striking the ceiling at an angle. Several spots on the ceiling were hit, each shot making a chunk of white cement disappear, revealing rows of green numbers scrolling rapidly to the right. The young team member was completely still by now. 2/3 of his body had turned into transparent blocks. His remaining half of a left hand was still clamped onto the iron leg of the desk. The monster took a step forward. When it stepped down, the desk's iron leg turned into a jumble of flashing colored stripes. The young man's body flickered in those stripes twice, then, like being erased by a rubber, vanished from head to toe. All that was left on the ground was the cracked military watch, still ticking tirelessly. The old-timer crawled on the ground. He grabbed his right shoulder with his left hand. His right shoulder was now fading, emitting faint blue light. He dug his left hand into the gaps between floor tiles, crawling forward while banging his head against nearby ammo boxes. He knocked over a dark green ammo box, spilling belts of ammunition across the floor. He pressed his head against the box, burying his face among the shell casings, his legs still kicking backward desperately. I stood still, taking a step forward with my right foot. I saw that most of the ceiling had collapsed. Black squares rained down like a downpour, one of them grazing my left sleeve. My left sleeve instantly had a neat square hole cut out of it, and the exposed skin showed no blood, only a few green lines racing beneath the surface. I turned my head and looked toward the far end of the ruined warehouse. In the deepest corner of the warehouse, there was a small iron door painted with red paint. Most of the red paint had peeled off, revealing rusty iron beneath. On it, 3 crooked white characters were painted: "Control Room." The loudspeaker above crackled again, with that AI female voice. Its voice was now a bit stuttered, like a tape player getting stuck, making a crackling, buzzing sound. It said, "Cleaning progress, 70%. Remaining test subjects, please cooperate with the cleaning." It said "cooperate" 3 times in a row, each time sharper than the last, the sound rattling the few remaining walls of the control room with high-frequency vibrations. Old Oil heard the sound and lifted his head from the pile of bullets. Half of his face was already covered in green numbers, and one of his eyes had turned into a glowing square. With his left hand, he grabbed a handful of loose bullets from the ground and hurled them straight at the monster's face. The bullets struck the sunken pits of the creature's face, sending up ripples of red. Old Oil rolled his entire body to the side, his right side slamming into the falling black squares, instantly losing another chunk of himself. I didn't go back to pull Old Oil again. I bent down and grabbed the rifle that had fallen at my feet. I jammed the stock of the rifle hard against my right shoulder, pushed off with my feet, and broke into a long stride toward the small, red-painted iron door. My right foot hit the ground with every step, each time sinking a little into the black pits. My body stretched into a long string of green afterimages in midair, as if several versions of me were charging forward in a single line. The monster with 3 elbows turned around. The red and blue squares flickering and shifting across its body let out a piercing sizzle, like the sound of a high-voltage wire shorting out. Its elongated right arm lifted again, the 3 joints twisting into a strange triangle in the air, aimed at my back. I didn't have time to look back. I rushed to the red-painted iron door and slammed my uninjured right shoulder hard against it. Bang! The iron door cracked open a gap. The light inside was dim, filled with all kinds of instruments and glowing red indicator lights. I rolled through the gap, my back crashing heavily against the iron floor inside. As soon as I landed, I kicked the door panel hard with my left foot. The iron door slammed shut with a heavy thud. I reached out my right hand, grabbed the thick iron bolt on the back of the door, and forced it down. The bolt locked tight into its slot. When I grabbed the bolt, a burst of fine blue light erupted from my right palm. I knew I didn't have much time left. In this world of numbers and squares, I had to find the real physical switch and cut the main power to this multi-million-dollar simulator. I lay flat on the iron floor of the control room. My right palm was still emitting fine blue light, the skin of my palm looking almost translucent, revealing the flickering green characters beneath. The main control room was huge. Tall iron cabinets lined both sides, their red and green indicator lights flashing wildly. Straight ahead was a row of computer screens, but they were all glitching now. The screens were covered in thick, colorful red and green stripes, cascading down like a waterfall. In the center of the room stood a large gray iron control console. I propped myself up with my left hand and crawled forward, grimacing in pain. With every step forward, my boots hit the iron floor with a heavy clang. Some parts of the floor had started to soften, feeling sticky underfoot, like stepping on melting asphalt. Just then, the red-painted iron door behind me let out a deafening crash. Thud! The center of the big iron door caved inward in a huge dent. The green paint on the dented iron surface shattered into countless tiny green squares, flickering as they fell through the air. The thick iron bolt holding the door twisted and bent, emitting a screeching sound of tearing metal. Thud! Another brutal hit. The left hinge of the iron door snapped clean off. The broken iron screw flew out, hitting the nearby cabinet and leaving small dents. That corner of the cabinet instantly vanished, the broken edge bare, with green English letters scrolling rapidly upward. I scrambled and rolled behind the big iron console. Bang! The entire red-painted iron door was finally smashed through. The door panel flew inward, crashing heavily into a row of computer screens, shattering them into pieces. Countless shiny glass shards flew everywhere in the room, but before they could hit the ground, they turned into transparent pixels in midair and vanished. The huge monster with 3 elbows squeezed through the doorway. Its body was too tall. Its head slammed into the control room ceiling. Where it hit, large patches of black squares rained down like a storm. On its elongated right arm, the 3 backward-bending elbows twisted one after another, making a sickening cracking sound. Old Oil was actually behind it. He wasn't dead, but he had completely changed. Old Oil Bar's entire lower body was completely gone, leaving only the part from his chest upward. His left hand clawed desperately at the iron floor, shouting loudly as he crawled with one arm toward the control room. His right hand had already turned into several shimmering blue light ribbons, flailing irregularly in the air. His left eye had fully transformed into a small green square, blinking on and off. As he crawled, Old Oil Bar used his left hand to pull the last bare real weapon from his waist. It was the high-explosive grenade we had brought in. He bit down on the pull ring with his teeth and yanked it hard. Raising his still-functional left arm, he hurled the grenade with all his strength toward the monster's feet. The grenade arced through the air, landing squarely on the monster's thigh, which was covered in colorful squares. A deafening boom erupted as the grenade detonated right by the monster's feet. A massive burst of fire and heat instantly engulfed most of the doorway. The explosion sent several iron floor panels in the control room flying. Those shattered pieces danced in the flames, but before they could hit the ground, they all turned into flickering colored horizontal stripes in the air. Inside the huge fireball, half of the monster's left thigh was blown away. But no blood spilled out. Instead, what was exposed were sticky, black, oil-like tendrils that writhed continuously. Those tendrils were wrapped in rows of green code, frantically crossing and recombining in the fire. In less than a fraction of a second, the black tendrils regrouped, reforming the bizarre leg covered in colorful squares. The monster's sunken face pit suddenly rotated. Dozens of eyeballs inside it instantly locked onto Old Oil Bar, who was lying on the ground. It lifted its foot, and that massive soul stomped directly onto Old Oil Bar's chest. Old Oil Bar didn't even have time to scream. His chest, neck, and his shouting face, the moment they were crushed under the monster's soul, erupted in a dense burst of green sparks. The sparks were blinding, turning the surrounding cabinets a sickly green. Then, his entire upper body faded away in those sparks, vanishing from the iron floor as cleanly as a sand painting washed away by a flood. All that remained was his rifle, lying crookedly at the edge of the black pit. After disposing of Old Oil Bar, the monster didn't stop. It turned around, its 3 massive eyes fixed on the gray iron control desk where I was hiding. The colorful squares on its body began flickering rapidly, and the buzzing sound grew incredibly loud, like hundreds of cicadas chirping right in my ears. Its long right arm swung forward violently. 3 reversed elbows created a cascade of colorful afterimages in the air. That hand, devoid of nails, slammed directly onto the iron control desk in front of me. Boom! Under that slap, the expensive iron control desk crumpled like paper, a massive crack splitting right through its middle. The entire large iron table split apart, with countless wires and circuit boards snapping and crackling, emitting pungent, burning plastic smoke. As the smoke drifted through the air, it too turned into coarse, blocky mosaics. Seizing the chance as the control desk split, I rolled sideways out from under the table. My left foot pushed off the ground. The sole of my left shoe had also been partially torn off during the roll, making it slip on the iron floor. I spotted the far end of the control room, where a wall covered in green indicator lights held a strikingly prominent red iron box. On the box's surface, a large lightning bolt symbol was spray-painted in white. To the right of the box was a green switch handle, about as thick as an arm. That handle was sticking up high, with two big red characters painted on it. High voltage. That was the main physical power switch for this building, or rather, this massive simulator. If I could just yank that thick green handle down, this bizarre world of numbers and squares would shut down completely from the power cut. I sprinted toward that red iron box. My right arm cut through the air, trailing a long string of green palm shadows. I could feel my 5 fingers starting to go numb, stiff and clumsy, like they'd been soaking in ice water for hours, making even bending them a struggle. The monster behind me caught on to my intent. Its 2 strange legs didn't take a step. Instead, its entire elongated body slid across the ground, hurtling toward me in a frantic glide. As it moved, the air around it began to collapse in large swaths. The 2 rows of tall server racks to my left instantly melted into endless black holes the moment the monster got close. Those black holes contained nothing, only a cold, dead silence. I rushed to the big red iron box. I reached out with my left hand, the only one I could still move, and grabbed the thick green electrical switch handle. The handle was made of pure iron, cold to the touch, with rough red paint that dug into my palm and made it ache. That pain felt incredibly real. The moment I yanked the handle down with all my strength, a terrifying force slammed into my back. It was the monster's long arm striking me. There was no sound of bones breaking. I just felt my entire back go ice cold in an instant. My tactical vest, the armor plate inside, and the clothes on my back the moment they made contact. They turned into countless tiny gray pixel blocks that crackled and fell off my shoulders. I watched my left arm, which was sticking out from my chest, as the camouflage pattern on it began to peel off piece by piece, revealing translucent blue muscles and bones underneath. The AI-generated female voice boomed from the ceiling, crackling and stuttering. It said cleanup progress, 99%. Core error detected. Immediate removal. Immediate removal. The monster's other long arm reached out too, its 3 elbows crossing on either side of my neck. Its massive hand, covered in fleshy blocks, had already touched my chin. The pungent smell of burnt circuit boards stung my eyes and nose, making tears and snot stream down my face. I used the last bit of strength left in my body. I threw all the weight of my left arm onto that thick green handle, even adding my right hand, which was starting to turn transparent. I gripped them together tightly and used my entire body to slam the handle down. "Break!" I shouted in my mind. Crack! That heavy green iron switch handle, with every ounce of strength I had, was finally yanked all the way down to the bottom. A crisp metallic clang burst from the red iron box. The green handle hit the bottom. The entire control room and the long corridor outside the door plunged into absolute darkness in an instant. The swirling eyeballs, the flashing red and blue blocks, and the green numbers rolling up the walls, all of it vanished in that moment. No sound, no light, nothing. Even the breathing of the monster gripping my chin disappeared. My body lost its support and slammed onto the hard iron floor with a thud. My left hand was still clinging to the big iron box of the switch. Around me, there was only a deathly stillness. I lay on the floor, gulping down cold air. I reached out with my right hand to touch my face. My palm felt warm against my skin, slick with sticky sweat and the tears from the smoke. No flickering lights, no hard pixel blocks. I don't know how long passed, but a faint red light suddenly flickered on above me. That was the base's real backup battery kicking in. I grabbed the big switch box and staggered to my feet. My right sleeve was gone, and the exposed skin had deep red marks where the monster's hand had touched me. The skin was bruised and numb to the touch. I stumbled out of the control room, Lying on the floor by the door was old-timer's rifle. The barrel was still warm, giving off a faint smell of gunpowder smoke. Next to the rifle was a pile of shiny, empty shell casings, mixed with a few black nylon straps that had fallen off old-timer's tactical vest. Where the young soldier had lain, nothing was left except a cracked military watch lying in a crack in the concrete. Its tiny gears completely stopped. I climbed the stone stairs of the emergency exit, one step at a time. My legs were so weak that my knees knocked together with every step. I pushed open the fire door at the end of the hallway and reached the top of the base. The cold morning wind hit my face, stinging my skin. Outside, the sky was already bright. A golden sun was slowly rising from the horizon over the big parade ground, spilling vast rays of light across the green grass. I walked over to the wire fence around the parade ground, rubbed my sore eyes, and opened them wide, staring hard at the newly risen red sun. Right in the center of that red sun, there was a tiny, faintly glowing pixel line of green. In the red sunlight, it flickered softly,